Hi, everyone. My name's Megan Grant, and I'm just going to quickly share my STEM education perspective based on what I do in my classroom and the readings from Module 1. All right, so quickly about myself. I am a teacher at Upper Moreland Middle School. I've been there for the past 20 years. I spent 17 years in a math classroom and the past 3 years teaching science. I currently teach sixth grade science, and I also teach a STEM class. Or it's kind of an enrichment class. I make it into a STEM class. The reason I'm here getting my STEM endorsement is really to improve my skills as a teacher. I truly want to understand principles that really drive quality science instruction and incorporate them into my teaching. Chapter 11, I think, is a perfect example of exemplary science teaching. I agree with everything that they did throughout that chapter and have been trying to make that kind of the methods that I use in my classroom. I still have a ways to go, but it's great taking this class and the other classes to kind of just become a better science teacher for my students. So, in regards to how students learn science best, I really connected what we read in chapter 1, 9, and 11. And I really do believe that I try to bring those ideas into my own teaching. I do not think I implement them as seamlessly as the examples we read about, but it is definitely my goal as a science teacher to get there. Um, I believe that inquiry should truly be at the center of how our students are learning science. It's not something that comes after them memorizing facts, but it's the method in which they really discover the content. I believe students learn best when they're actively engaged in questioning, experimenting, and observing. They're rethinking their ideas about the world and they're working collaboratively with others. They mentioned that Einstein's imagination was so key in all of his findings. So is collaboration. I think building a community centered classroom helps students realize that learning together can be a lot more powerful than working alone. Once students are engaged and curious, then I think we can connect their experiences back to the big scientific ideas and then introduce those technical terms and then dive into the equations. I think that's the moment when it all clicks because they've kind of lived the science first and now they actually want to understand it on a deeper level. So here I took a look at the three major principles of science learning and compared them to how I currently approach teaching in my own classroom. The first principle, engaging prior understandings, really stood out to me. I found it fascinating to learn, how much emphasis is placed in identifying students' preconceptions about everyday phenomena. Students often come into our classrooms with these misconceptions and just overall gaps in knowledge. And if we don't actively address and replace these misconceptions with accurate scientific concepts, they'll just carry those incorrect ideas forward. In my own classroom, I do make an effort to tap into the students' prior knowledge. At the beginning of lessons, I usually have open conversations about what they think or already know about a topic. But after reading chapter 11, I realized I'm not always intentional about creating space for inquiry that challenges my students' initial ideas. I really tend to focus on helping them explore the correct concept rather than designing activities that I would say directly confront and try to disprove maybe their original conceptions. The second principle really emphasized that students should learn science through inquiry and not in addition to it. I feel like the readings were really stressing the importance of integrating our content while the students are exploring and encouraging them to observe and imagine and reason and really allowing the students to discover rather than always being kind of directed to the right answer. In my classroom, I try to begin with inquiry and then build content from there. But I've noticed the program that I use often follows a step by step recipe style that kind of makes inquiry feel like an add on. I am working to shift away from this and having students design their own experience. As chapter 11 pointed out, this real inquiry takes careful planning and a deep understanding of students' starting points from the teacher's perspective. Unfortunately, I think a lot of our pre-made programs don't fully support this, and it can make it harder to really align our teaching with how students are truly supposed to learn science. Lastly, the third principle really focuses on the importance of metacognition, and that we have to help students really think about their thinking. As teachers, we need to guide students in reflecting on their own understanding, recognizing their misconceptions, and evaluating, both their individual learning and their contributions in group settings. I like how the text emphasized the value of students really understanding themselves as learners, especially within a community of learners. In my classroom, I do use formative assessments, but I do need to create, I would say, deeper opportunities for students to really reflect on throughout the learning process, obviously not just at the end. I really appreciated how the teacher in chapter 11 had students complete a questionnaire after, the beginning inquiry activities, and then use that information to meet with those students who are still struggling while allowing other students to move forward with their experimentation, when she met with them or he. That kind of differentiation based on reflection is something I do need to incorporate into my classroom more. I also realized that I need to be more intentional about giving students time to process and make sense of these scientific concepts, rather than rushing into the next topic. I think timing, and allowing kids to move at their own pace is absolutely key. So I think there are several barriers that students really face when learning science. I think one major issue is that many of our programs don't really fully align with the three key principles of science learning we've discussed. I think another challenge is that not all teachers are really trained in these best practices, which makes it harder to implement them effectively. Some students think science is just for the intellectually gifted, like they don't belong there or their math skills aren't strong enough. I also see students thinking math is boring and it's a list of facts and equations to memorize. And I also believe that some students just don't see themselves as scientists, especially if they're a minority. They're just not represented in the science fields. When looking at the different perspectives on STEM education, I think my approach aligns most closely with the integrated disciplines model. I really connect with the idea of STEM as being a transdisciplinary program as well, but I just don't think that I'm quite honestly there, nor is my school district yet. Um, but I do feel strongly that science, technology, engineering, and math should really be fully intertwined, and that students should be drawing on all of these skills as they work on meaningful projects and solve real world problems. I guess I would say when I look at the transdisciplinary course or that program that I do aspire to get there, and I want to move in that direction. I'm just quite not there yet as an educator. All right, there are my references. Sorry again for going over, as I always tend to do. I hope you enjoyed the presentation, and I look forward to hearing yours as well. Thanks.